Let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. How many of us carry burdens that prevent us from living the lives we were meant to live? And how many of those burdens take on a life of their own, derailing us from not only our own finish line, but the race that we're on entirely? People struggling with eating disorders carry these burdens each and every single moment of each and every single day, often hidden in plain sight. Now, I want you to picture a little boy, 5 years old, standing next to a bright red fire hydrant. He looks up, he stares into the sky, and he asks God to bring him a boyfriend. That moment, I believe, was where the seeds of self-doubt, self-loathing, shame, and guilt were planted, the burdens that would lead me to develop a debilitating and life-threatening eating disorder. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. Every 62 minutes, someone in this country dies as a direct result of their eating disorder, and 30 million individuals, both men and women, struggle with this illness. Sadly, up to 80% of kids will have been on a diet by the time they reach the 4th grade. Now, 13 years after those seeds were planted, at the age of 18, my eating disorder began to manifest itself in me physically, although unconsciously, and robbed me, like millions of others, of my true purpose. Now, whether it was my eating disorder or the struggle with my sexuality, both hijacked the race God had set for my life. Now, I want you to picture that 18-year-old man standing in front of a full-length mirror, telling himself, something has got to change. I began eating healthier and exercising more, but what started out as innocent became dark and obsessive. I was working out fanatically, pushing my body to its limits. I developed extreme food regimens and isolated myself from my family and friends. At one point, I was told that I resembled a Holocaust victim. Now, to the average person, this would be absolutely horrifying, but to my disordered thinking, it sounded so sweetly of success. 4 years later, at the age of 22, I sat on the floor of my home, wrapped in an electric blanket because my body was unable of keeping warm on its own. I proceeded to write into the Dr. Phil show. Now, I didn't write in because I thought I had an eating disorder or that I was even sick. I wrote in because my body was, in so many ways, completely broken. My liver and kidney function were compromised. I had developed osteopenia, and at the age of 22, I was told that I had suffered a heart attack. Now, I don't remember much of the show itself. However, I do remember a particular moment during a commercial break when Dr. Phil leaned over, placed his hand on my arm, and he whispered, "This could be your one chance to get your life back on track." Now, although the appearance on the show didn't cure me or make me quote-unquote all better, it did provide me my first step toward recovery by entering me into a residential treatment center. Now, while I was there, I saw what the research tells us. Eating disorders are not only Caucasian teenagers who appear to be emaciated. I was treated alongside both men and women of all ages, races, sizes, backgrounds, and faiths. But in my disordered thinking, I still didn't believe that I was sick enough to be there, even though men represent up to 25% of those with anorexia and are actually at a higher risk of dying because their diagnoses come later in the game. The realization, though, that I truly was sick and that as a man I had an eating disorder came with one vivid memory. Lying in my residential bed, I listened to the slow clicking of the nasogastric feeding tube my treatment team had inserted. And I heard the shallow, labored breaths of my roommate only footsteps away. I stayed awake all night, wondering if each breath was going to be his last. Now, one might wonder how, over the course of 4 years, or over this dramatic chain of events, some sort of intervention hadn't taken place. But roughly a year prior to writing into the Dr. Phil show, I did seek medical advice at the insistence of my mother to appease my family's concerns. You see, my family, they saw my dramatic weight change. They saw that I was constantly cold and that I avoided social gatherings. They knew that my personality was different and that I somehow always explained my behaviors away. But those with eating disorders or disordered eating don't always exhibit the same symptoms. In fact, some can vary wildly depending upon the type one struggles with. Some of the more common warning signs of an eating disorder, though, do include sudden weight loss or weight gain in a short period of time, chaotic food intake, pretending to eat, skipping meals, or binging and purging. However, one of the most predominant factors in eating disorder behavior is the intense urge for control. Unfortunately, many medical professionals are not equipped, nor are they prepared to diagnose and treat eating disorders. And when you couple that with the eating disorder mindset, which tells us to lie, to deceive, and to go to great lengths to hide what is truly going on, it can make a diagnosis extremely difficult. At that initial doctor's visit, I actually convinced myself that what the doctor told my mother and I was true. He's just a runner, and all he needs is a little fat in his diet. Eating disorders often lurk undetected, and lab tests can present skewed results. I left that first doctor's visit with a prescription in hand to treat a legitimate medical condition, not caused by anything natural, but by my own eating disorder behavior. And that prescription, unfortunately, only furthered my eating disorder's goals. What is the thought process of someone who would go to such lengths to utilize some of the most basic tools we have as humans, both food and movement, as weapons against themselves, often without even realizing it? Famed economist Alan Greenspan has a quote that I think beautifully illustrates what it is like to struggle with and explain the invisible demon that is an eating disorder. I know you think you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. A family member once asked me, "Troy, why don't you just pick up the bottle?" You see, it's so much easier for us as humans to process problems in terms of the physical and really not so easy in terms of the emotional or psychological. Family members want to say things like, "Why don't you just start eating?" Or "Why don't you just stop exercising? I know that you're binging. I know that you are purging." Or oppositely, "Man, you look so healthy," or "You look so good." But truly, our phrases really should emphasize, "I know that this is difficult for you, but I am proud of you. You are so much more than your eating disorder, and no, I don't understand, but I do believe you." In the development of an eating disorder, genetics and biology load the gun, and something in the environment pulls the trigger. Parents, families, and friends are not responsible for, nor are they the cause of one's eating disorder. Eating disorders are never a choice, but your recovery is. Parents, families, and friends can play a vital role in aiding the recovery process. Had it not been for my mother's insistence to visit the doctor, or my Christian friends' encouragement to participate in the Dr. Phil show, I would not have taken my first step toward becoming whole. Science tells us, though, that the brain's reward pathways are actually altered in those with eating disorders. Those with anorexia actually prioritize their long-term goal of weight change and their ritualistic behaviors, like with food and exercise, over their natural hunger and fullness cues. And neuroimaging studies have shown us that food is often associated with fear. So, to those with eating disorders, hunger equates strength, purging soothes, and binging brings fleeting gratification. Brain differences in reward processing also appear to persist in our brains long after the recovery process and remain in our brains as scars. So we can't look at an individual who has been in recovery for a significant period of time or someone who is at a healthy weight and know that they are, quote unquote, all better. Just as with other physical ailments like cancers and physical trauma, the emotional healing takes time. Physical appearance is never representative of emotional healing. Now, when supporting a loved one, learn absolutely as much as you can, but never buy into the eating disorder's excuses. Ally with the part of them that wants to get better and remind them of why their recovery is so important. The logic behind my eating disorder behavior for me was a constant invisible battle with thoughts and urges to restrict, exercise, and to push my body further every day. My racetrack only seemed to get longer, and my finish line always edged further out of sight. The eating disorder mindset is like watching life pass you by as you're trapped helplessly, merely existing as a prisoner of your own thoughts. At my lowest, I would work my body to ruin and only experienced momentary relief while I was at rest. I often questioned, had I worked hard enough to earn my sustenance? Was the mirror on my side today? And the answer was always no. And the internal struggle with my sexuality had me questioning, well, if I wasn't good enough for the mirror, for myself, or for anybody else, then I wasn't good enough for God. And surely if I couldn't be good enough for God, then whom was I good enough for? To those of you currently in your own battle, know that science is on your side. Science is discovering research and treatment breakthroughs each and every single day. No, you are not crazy, and no, you are not worthless, but you are only as sick as your secrets. I encourage you to reach out to someone you can confide in. Now, that person you confide in may not understand what you're going through, they may not understand what you're feeling, and they most definitely may not understand your behavior. But you can know that you are no longer in the struggle on your own. After running my race through the lens of an eating disorder, I have learned that it hijacked God's race for my life. I dealt with life's major obstacles by literally running from my burdens through the use of excessive exercise and food restriction. And even after 10 years of recovery, I have learned that recovery is a race of endurance. It takes time. Time is something that people with eating disorders need the most, but are all too often robbed of. The recovery path is not straight or short or a short sprint. It is an unpredictable marathon journey with incredible lows and monumental highs. There were many times in my recovery process that I thought I saw the finish line. I thought that being open and honest regarding the struggle with my sexuality, having the best job, the highest number and types of degrees, resolving my childhood trauma, being more conservative or more liberal, or repairing all of my relationships. I thought each represented the final leg in what would make me, quote unquote, all better. I've learned to stop searching for that cure-all and instead focus on the smaller steps that will eventually lead me to wholeness. Finally, I want you to remember that if you are in your eating disorder, you unfortunately are both the abuser and the victim. Eating disorders are not a way to live. Eating disorders are simply a way to die. But if you reach out, if you are honest, and you are prepared to run your true race of endurance, you can be assured that you will place yourself on the path to live. Thank you.